Hello everyone, welcome to the election feature. Big movement on the electoral map today. We are going to take a look at the 2024 election map based on the latest polls in all 50 states to see who is the favorite to win the election in November.
Donald Trump is climbing to new heights as reflected in the latest 2024 election polls. He's now dominating key swing states and even taking the lead nationally, according to the New York Times. Today, we're diving into the updated electoral map based on these new numbers. Before getting into the polls, we first lock in the solid states for both candidates to simplify the map. Starting with Harris, she's likely to secure California, Hawaii, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maryland, the District of Columbia, and the 1st District of Maine. On Trump's side, he's solid in Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North and South Dakota, almost all of Nebraska except the 2nd District, along with Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, South Carolina, and Alaska. This gives the former president an early edge, already sitting at 125 electoral votes. We've just received a significant polling update, and this is incredible news for Donald Trump. The New York Times/Siena Research released fresh data for 3 key states: Arizona, North Carolina, and Georgia. Trump is now leading by 5 points in Arizona. Just over a month ago, their last poll had Harris ahead by 5. That's a massive 10-point swing in Trump's favor in a short time. I don't believe Arizona shifted this dramatically. Instead, I think the initial poll showing Harris up by 5 was off, and now we're seeing the corrected numbers. In polling terms, Trump's current lead of +5 in a state he's expected to win by around 3 or 4 points is a solid indicator. And remember, this is coming from a liberal pollster. In North Carolina, Trump holds a 2-point lead. A month ago, Harris was up by 2, so that's a 4-point improvement for Trump. As for Georgia, Trump maintains a solid 4-point advantage, which matches his lead from the previous poll. This data, collected from September 17th to the 21st, shows Trump leading in 3 major swing states: Arizona by 5, Georgia by 4, and North Carolina by 2. These shifts in his favor are noteworthy, especially in states that usually don't swing this heavily for him in polling. It's now likely that Harris might adjust her strategy, shifting more attention from Arizona and Nevada to focus on Georgia and North Carolina. While I don't think they've fully written off Arizona, it does seem Trump is tilting toward a victory there. Georgia is also looking very solid for Trump. Several polls have him up by 3 to 4 points there, and even liberal-leaning pollsters are acknowledging it. In North Carolina, a state Trump won in both 2016 and 2020, his performance is expected to remain strong. Based on the numbers we're seeing, he's outperforming his 2020 results across the board, and the gap isn't even close. North Carolina, which he won by 1.5 points in 2020 and by 3 points in 2016, looks likely to stay in Trump's column. Emerson polling is now indicating that Trump holds a solid advantage in most swing states. In Georgia, for instance, Emerson reports Trump leading by 3 points. At this moment, he's the clear favorite there. It's quite apparent in Arizona, where Trump holds a slim lead as well, up by 1 point according to Emerson. While that margin is narrow and within the margin of error, when you consider all the other Arizona polls, voter registration data, and insights from the Harris campaign, it's clear that Trump is trending in the right direction in both Georgia and Arizona. Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, on the other hand, are shaping up to be tight races, but Trump currently has a narrow 1-point lead in Wisconsin. This is encouraging news for Trump, especially considering that he tends to outperform polls in Wisconsin. This time around, he might only need to beat the polling by less than 1 point, depending on what the Real Clear Politics average indicates. It's also worth mentioning that Harris isn't holding a solid lead in Wisconsin. She's not up by 4 or 5 points. If anything, the race is tight enough that Trump may not even need to outperform the polls. He could already be leading, or at least very close in Wisconsin's overall polling. This is especially positive for Trump compared to where he stood in 2020 and 2016, particularly in the Rust Belt states. Additionally, Trump is ahead in Pennsylvania by 1 point, another crucial battleground. If we take Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Georgia together, three key states where Trump is gaining momentum, it's a solid sign of strength for his campaign. Recently, there was an outlier poll from Pennsylvania showing Harris up by 4 or 5 points, but that doesn't quite match up with the trends we're seeing elsewhere, especially in Wisconsin. Voter registration data suggests that Pennsylvania may be tilting more Republican than Wisconsin, which could actually make Wisconsin a tougher state for Trump to win than Pennsylvania. Still, this is bullish news for Trump since Pennsylvania carries 19 electoral votes, which is more than Wisconsin's total. Nevada is locked in a solid tie. Several recent polls show the race in Nevada is razor close. This marks the third poll in a week showing Nevada deadlocked. North Carolina has Trump up by 1, while Michigan shows Harris leading by 2. These numbers match up with what we've seen lately. At one point, Michigan seemed to be leaning toward Trump, but among the Rust Belt states, it's shaping up to be the toughest for him to win. Pennsylvania seems the most likely for Trump to take, while Wisconsin remains another Rust Belt battleground where he has a solid chance. Typically, these states move together, but this election might see a split, with Harris taking Michigan and Trump securing Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. This is a trade Trump would be more than happy with, especially as his numbers are looking strong in Arizona, North Carolina, and Georgia. North Carolina could end up being a tighter contest than Georgia, though recent polling has looked more solid for Trump in Georgia than in North Carolina. Nevada is still a toss-up, but based on historical trends from 2016 and 2020, it remains a battleground. Trump has a slight advantage as data that was once solidly Democratic has shifted, and his campaign has successfully tapped into local issues, such as the no tax on tips stance, a policy Kamala Harris later echoed at a rally in Nevada. This moment could stand out as a turning point in the state. In summary, Georgia is looking stronger for Trump by the day, as is Arizona. Wisconsin also appears to be leaning his way this election cycle, while Pennsylvania looks very favorable for Trump. Nevada remains a toss-up, but this is a significant improvement from where Trump stood in 2016 and 2020. North Carolina slightly tilts in Trump's favor, while Michigan leans toward Harris. Let's get back to the map and look at some of the states that Harris or Trump are likely to win by a margin of 7 to 15 points. Keep in mind, a solid state is one that will go to either candidate by 15 points or more. Kamala Harris will still carry Washington and Oregon, but it won't be by the nearly 20-point leads Joe Biden had back in 2020. These states will likely swing closer to a 10 to 15-point margin. Then there's Illinois. Its 19 electoral votes will comfortably go to Harris, though likely by just under 15 points. In Colorado, recent polls show Harris holding a lead just above the double digits. She won't outperform Biden's 2020 result when he won the state by nearly 14 points. Harris won't come close to that. Harris is also the favored candidate in New York and New Jersey, but both states are mired in political scandals. In New York, we saw Andrew Cuomo step down amid sexual harassment accusations, and now the current governor, Kathy Hochul, along with Mayor Eric Adams, are facing their own struggles with low approval ratings. Meanwhile, in New Jersey, Senator Bob Menendez has been repeatedly accused of bribery. Delaware also lands in the likely column. It's just not as liberal as some of its neighboring states. On Trump's side, his likely states will give him a solid advantage, starting with Iowa and Ohio, two states that were thought to be competitive in the 2020 race. In 2016, Trump flipped both Iowa and Ohio, winning by close to double digits after the states had seen 8 years of Obama victories. In 2020, Democrats believed they had a shot at flipping them back. Polls predicted Trump would win by just 1%, and there were even times when Biden was ahead in the polls in these two states. But when the dust settled, Trump won Iowa and Ohio by almost the exact same margins as in 2016. Now, heading into 2024, it's clear Trump is the solid favorite in both of these Midwestern battlegrounds. Next up is Texas. The Lone Star State was seen as potentially competitive, especially with some liberal-leaning polls showing the race within the margin of error. In fact, Trump was expected to win by just 1%, similar to his narrow margins in states like Iowa and Ohio. But ultimately, he secured Texas by nearly 6 points. There was never really much doubt about the outcome. It was clear from the start that Texas was going red. Joe Biden didn't have a real shot, even though Democratic polls and rhetoric tried to paint a picture that Texas might actually flip blue. Yes, Texas is shifting to the left over time, but when it comes to a Democrat winning the presidency here, that's still a long way off, probably at least a couple of decades. The state is so massive, and flipping the millions of voters necessary for Democrats to prevail is a long-term project. By the time that happens, the Midwest will likely have cemented itself as a solid Republican stronghold. What we're witnessing nationwide is the Sun Belt moving leftward while the Midwest moves in the opposite direction. As for Texas, it remains likely red for the foreseeable future. Elections here will grow more competitive, but that won't become a significant problem for the GOP for a while. Now take Florida. At this point, compared to 2020, it's essentially a guaranteed 30 electoral votes. 4 years ago, Florida wasn't a sure thing for Trump. It was considered one of the most competitive battleground states in the country, and with good reason. Back in 2012, it was the only tilt state on the map when Barack Obama barely eked out wins in places like Iowa and Ohio. In 2016, Trump took Florida again, though by a tilt margin, showing how competitive it still was. Yet by 2020, few anticipated Joe Biden performing worse than Hillary Clinton in the state. But Trump actually improved upon his showing from 4 years prior, making Florida seem significantly more conservative now, especially compared to where it stood 4 or 8 years ago, or 8 and...
In 2022, Ron DeSantis was re-elected as governor by an overwhelming 20 points margin. Florida is undeniably red now. Trump may not win it by more than 15 points, but he is likely to carry it by 7 to 10 points. There is no doubt he will take these 13 electoral votes, which weren't guaranteed in the last election but are now virtually assured for the Gov and Donald Trump. We also have Minne's 2nd district, which is solidly leaning red as well. That leaves us just 12 states accounting for 128 electoral votes. These states are the true deciders of the election. Without them, no candidate has a realistic path to reaching the critical 270 electoral votes. Trump, however, is only 51 electoral votes away, while Kamala Harris hasn't even crossed 200 yet. Now, let's fill in the lean states. Starting with the lean Harris states, we have New Mexico. While she's at risk here, given the steady shift of Hispanic voters to the right, it is not likely to be a major problem for 2024, especially after Joe Biden's double-digit win in the state in 2020. Democrats still hold a clear advantage in New Mexico for now. We have got New Hampshire and Maine, two northeastern states that, much like in 2016, are likely to come down to the wire. Back then, Clinton only managed to edge out a victory in New Hampshire by a razor-thin percentage of 0.38 and minus by a percentage of 2.9. While Joe Biden significantly widened those margins in 2020, winning both at near double digits, Kamala Harris is poised to take them by a more modest 3 to 5 points in 2024. With those states in her column, that puts Harris just over 200 electoral votes. The election in November will apparently be very exciting. And guys, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like the video and turn on the notification bell. See you in next video. Thank you.